The listening side of these recordings that we're gifted with can really help accelerate our study, kind of speeding up the timeline of how long it takes to learn a raga, to really start to, become sort of one with it, or allow it to sort of integrate with yourself and digest, internalize all these things that are so essential to our, development as musicians, especially if we're trying to play, in this style, concerts, composing on the spot, really digging in and exploring, and also having fun, because that's where like a lot of the magic lies too. Heaven forbid you actually enjoy yourself and not, or only in like, the most disciplined study. Tonight we're going to look at Raga Desh. There's a really nice video of Pandit Nikhil Banerjee playing Desh with Pandit Mahapurush from like the late 60s in San Francisco, done by KQED. It's a fantastic video, and there's a bit more in the beginning with more explanatory stuff about the music, tabla solos, things like that. And it is just a really nice video. Nikhilji is in such amazing form, as he always is, but it's a really beautiful recording. The scale is in what we call kamaj tat. So one thing, this is in C sharp, so I had to tune up a little bit to be able to match the recording. Kamaj scale is straight like this. So Shuddh knee on the way up and Komal knee on the way down. Sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. But the difference here with this raga is that we ascend like this. And then descend. But so we're ascending from knee. You could, if you're thinking about the scale of Desh being pretty straightforward, then it would be more like this. Sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re ga sa. This would be the ascending descending scale, but a little bit more full comes from Shuddh knee. Ni ni sa re ma pa ni sa re sa ni da pa ma ga re ga sa. So this is a bit more full as far as the scale goes. And so what you'll notice is that we're skipping the ga on the way up. Ni sa re ma or sa re ma. So not sa re ga, sa re ma, sa re ma pa, and then it doesn't also go da, so it doesn't do this. Right? Sa re ma pa da. It skips the da, so no ga, no da in the ascending phrase. So this ascending phrase goes up to the re. Now with this, kind of the heart phrase in Desh would be this movement around the knees, both knees. So how you kind of get from Shuddh knee to Komal knee. So we're not going so much. Now we can see if Nikhilji does these things. These are the kinds of movements around the heart phrases, around the major movements of the raga, and kind of around the notes that are in the raga. These are things that I'm always trying to discern while listening to the masters. See how many different variations they show and how they kind of maneuver around potentially problematic areas. Like how do you maneuver around the ga in the ascending phrases? Or how do we move around the ga in this case? Or how do we move around the ta? So different rules that happen in the raga, and we can look at more examples. Because right now, if we take the scale, we know that the Komal knee is in the descending phrase, like. this ni sa re sa ni da pa. But when we are moving up the scale, we're gonna see a lot of use of the Komal ni. So with this is a nice kind of example of how even though the scale is going up to Shuddh ni, and it's only showing the Komal ni in the descending, well, this raga and many ragas, when there's certain notes that you can't play or when the ascending descending is different or exclude certain notes, we get to see how the movements and the feeling of the raga actually work. So in this case, as long as we're not going above Komal ni, we can use it more in different phrases. Granted, I just showed an ornament that does go above it, but it's so quick that it's not doing something like this. I'm not doing that. I'm just doing a quick ornament. So really the emphasis is on the ni. So these things, we have the Komal ni there, right? And so that one we can use in these phrases as long as we're not going past it. But when we take something like ga, if we sit there on the ga, it ends up becoming something else. It can end up sounding almost like more like tilak kamod or something. So when we think about what we can do, so the ga is definitely there and we can use it. We just have to be careful of when we're using it and how we show it. So with this recording, we're going to see tons of examples, or I'm assuming we're going to see tons of examples of how he shows these different phrases. So there's another raga that we'll just quickly kind of move over called Desh Malhar. And this is a different rag. They're both associated with the rainy season, but it's a different raga. One of the main things with that rag is that it also has Komal ga in it. And so when we look at this ending phrase here in Desh, it's not going, it's generally going sa ni da pa ma ga re ga sa, sa ni da pa ma ga re ga sa, this kind of things. Or we're showing a bit of that Shuddh ga more, and that's where the feeling kind of comes out more with the ga. But in Desh Malhar, we're going to see something more like this. And then we also, with this raga in Desh Malhar, we might get more of the two knees. So this part here, like the two knees and the Komal ga as well. The Komal ga very much is Desh Malhar. There's some times where you'll hear the two knees in Desh as well. And that is something I also want to look at with him. How is he showing those two knees? How do those come out? Do they come out at all? Or is he always going to show it in this more kind of distinct way? Different ways of showing it, rather than sliding from knee to knee. There are kind of instances in this music where it can be quite confusing, right? I mean, the music itself is massive and vast, and there's so many things to remember, but then there will be things where it goes beyond the scope of how the raga is described, and things that can be seemingly contradictory will come up. Like, oh, but you showed two knees in this particular recording, why? Maybe it comes out in a gut specifically, and so there might be a gut that uses them. And with the guts, with the themes, these kind of main melody that we keep returning to, there are cases where guts seem to be, I don't know if they're slightly outside of the rules of the raga, because guts are very specific too, but I don't know if they're like kind of memories or almost like crystallized versions of previous versions of the ragas, like older versions, because sometimes the guts are what last longer than particular aspects or understandings of the rag. The gut is passed down and passed down. I've also heard many times where a gut that is like a family gut, particular to one style, one gharana, will have many, many, many versions of it. And so you'll be like, that's the family gut, but then it's slightly different. And you're like, well, where did you learn that from? And it's like, oh, I learned it from this person. And who do they learn it from? They learned it from that person. And it's kind of, not that they're playing it wrong necessarily, they might be, and there is an aspect of that, because I think there's many variations of these kind of family older guts that kind of just sort of morph over time. And so with that, you'll get different versions of it that you might hear, or maybe in a concert they decided to switch it up and play it differently than they normally do, or maybe it was a gut that they learned when they were younger, or it's not coming out the way that they remembered, and so they kind of make one up on the spot. Not that they're breaking the rules of the raga, but just to point out that when we hear guts, sometimes guts seem to be almost slightly different than the way the raga even sounds. This is not always the case by any means. It's just something to be aware of. So where you might hear things that go slightly different than how you might learn the raga might be in the gut. And then if you're doing Taans. And now Taans are these faster movements. There's all types, and Nikhilji is a master of Taans, and this is something I'm really excited for, because if you want to learn how to do them better, or how to make them not rote exercises up and down the scale, these sapat Taans, which are incredible when done really fast, but when people just play fast and going up and down, it can end up sounding more scalic, like a scale, like an exercise almost. Something with Nikhilji is that he has so much variation in the way that he does his Taans that it's pretty brilliant how he can possibly think that fast. All types of gamak Taans and into sapat Taans, into just a whole world of very beautiful fast movements. Creative and evocative and emotional. Some people say that when you play really, really fast, there's almost like it's technically masterful and really profound to see somebody that good at that kind of speed and what they're playing, but it can move away from like the feeling, the andalin, the deeper feelings of the raga. So when someone like Nikhilji can play Taans that bring out emotion, that's pretty special. And it's not just Nikhilji, obviously. We're going to listen to him. That's why I'm pointing him out specifically. But he is masterful at this. And so this will be really fun to see what he does. But when you're looking at Taans, sometimes faster movements will also go through the raga differently. So if we were thinking about this being this maga re ga sa, but you will hear things that go, actually maybe now that I say that, ni da ba ma ga re sa, I mean maybe. Well, we'll see what he does, but sometimes you'll find in Taans where they might maybe make the scale a little more simple, so it won't be the full version of it, and they can do different variations around it, and they're moving so fast that you almost can't like get the feeling of the other note that's there, and it can bend the rules a little bit. So guts, Taans, these are things where you might see some variation in how the rules of the raga work. Now, this doesn't, all this is said with that idea that like you don't abuse these nuances. It's like, oh, I'm playing a Taan so I can play whatever I want. It's like, no way. You still have to follow the raga. It's just that like sometimes you're moving so fast and you're moving through things that, you might skip past a note. We're trying not to. And again, when we're learning composition, if we're listening to concerts and studying the lines, we're taking these all as examples. These are all examples for us to learn from and study. But we just want to be aware of where we're finding these differences. So I say all of that to come back to this idea of when we're looking at Desh versus Desh Malhar. Like, if you're playing Desh, you're probably not going to show that Komal ga. And then maybe you might show the Tunis a little bit, but it's not part of the core movement of the raga. The raga does not go... Absolutely. These kinds of things. Pa ni sa re, sa ni sa, ni da ni da pa. These kinds of movements will be there. Variations around these ornaments. These things, but it's not so much like this. I mean, they can sound pretty cool, and maybe we're gonna see, again, like we say this, we're gonna see what he does. How many times does he do it? If he even does it at all, let's see how many times he does 2 knees. So for me with the question, I'm looking at those 2 knees, how does he use it? I wanna see more examples around the ga, and see what he does variation-wise. There's some things I've heard, you know, these kinds of movements where it's like, well, the da is not an ascending phrase. It's not really how the raga goes, but in some cases there are lines. So we're going to see more examples of these types of things. Or rather, that's where I want to have that's where I have questions. Where does he show these different variations? Where does he show these different movements? So there's a lot to go through in this recording, and I don't know if we're going to get through the whole thing because it's pretty long. Then let's hop in and then see where we go. So this, again, is Nikhilji with Mahapurushji, KQED from the late 60s, and this is a video, and it's really a pretty, I've skimmed through it a little bit just to make sure that everything was working, and I think we're in for a major treat. So if you haven't seen it, enjoy. If you have seen it, well, we're going back in and we'll enjoy it one more time. Let's make sure this works for you. Oh, okay, so one thing, listen to this. So he has Shuddh the knee in the Tanpura. So this Tanpura is going, sorry. Now, one thing for all of us who are playing this, when we have Shuddh the knee in the Tanpura, or when we have it in the Jawari strings, for example, so knee is there, right? So if I strum, I have to tune my sword a little differently because we're at C sharp, but I have Shuddh the knee there. But if I'm playing this, it's fine. But when I do this movement and I come to this re and come down to the Komal knee and play with the strum, you're not actually hearing it as much right now because my Shuddh the knee is kind of masked in the Jawari. Normally it's right here. So if I play, you know, it's playing knee and Komal knee at the same time is a little weird sounding. Pretty dissonant sounding, right? So that's not a really pleasant sound. They're too close together. That's why when we're thinking about this raga, we're sliding in between them. So we have to be careful. So with the sarod or sitar or whatever instrument has knee, Shuddh the knee in there, when you play Komal knee and you strum and play it, that dissonance is going to be pretty stark. Now, that's super interesting because in this recording, he has Shuddh the knee in the Tanpura. I don't know why. So it sounds nice in the Tanpura. Pa ni sa sa sa, pa ni sa sa sa. But that means every time he comes to the Komal knee, pa ni, it ends up being pretty stark, that note. So I would love to ask him why he stuck Shuddh the knee in the Tanpura. And this isn't a judgment on him because if you can make it sound good, then it doesn't really matter. You can get away with it. But there are points that I was scrubbing through and it was like, yo, what's happening? And I was like, oh wait, the Tanpura has Shuddh the knee. So let's see how that is. Let's see if you even notice it. If you don't notice it, this is one aspect we want to try to focus on and see the things that we don't see, to hear the things that we don't realize that we're missing. That's kind of the key to this music in a lot of ways. You think you've heard everything, and then you listen more and you realize how much you were missing before. And that's like revisiting old recordings, revisiting your playing, through like recording yourself, all these types of things, and seeing that growth, seeing all the things, hearing all the things that we miss. So this is a subtle thing, but that's one thing I wanted to point out, because he has pa, ni, sa, sa, sa in the Tanpura. So let's go back just a sec as he starts, and keep that in mind as he goes into the Komal ni. So this is the first time. That's the first time he's shown some in this whole kind of handful of minutes here in the Alap. So a couple things to mention here. So as we go back, I'm trying to make some marks so I could go back and see where they were. So if one is to listen back to this Komal ni. It came out a couple times. I'm not sure if you caught it. If you did, right there. So as you hold Komal ni, that Shuddh ni is ringing out. So the Komal ni is ringing out with the Shuddh ni. And so this kind of thing is something to be aware of. Now, he's playing so beautifully that it's not like it really detracts from it too much, but it's just something to think about. It's almost like you're making the raga more difficult to play if you have a note that is that strong in the Tanpura. I'm sure many people use Shuddh ni in the Tanpura. It's just that if you do, it makes it, you just have to be a little bit more careful about that Komal ni. But he's not shying away from it whatsoever. He's playing it and doing lots of movements around this. He's going back to the Komal ni often, and he's using it. When he plays it, it keeps resonating with that Shuddh ni. So that's just something to be aware of. Then here, if we move ahead a little bit. This. This is a interesting ornament. So here he's moving from the Shuddh da into the Komal ni. So we know that the raga doesn't. Whoops, sorry. That's not a very common movement, as far as I understand in this raga, the da ni. This way, sa re ma pa ni da pa. If you do these kinds of things, you can move around it. Or ni da ni, pa ni da ni, but the thing is the destination is still coming to the Komal ni. So I guess you would argue with that with this ornament. It's just that it stuck out in my ear when I heard it. Because it's a good amount of dha. So sweet ornament, maybe if we were worried about the dha, we put this one to the side, right? And we look for more instances where he does it. So these are the kinds of ornaments that we want to look for or look out for. When we hear them, we just stick them to the side. I know I say this a lot, but it's a really useful tool for us if we're studying from recordings. Because if we take everything verbatim, we don't understand why they made the choices necessarily. We don't understand the context of when they used it. All these types of things are what my father would say when we'd ask questions, or I'd hear other people ask him questions of like, why can we do it this way? Like, why did you teach it this way? Why did you play it this way in this recording or in this concert? And, if you listen back, you'd be like, you don't understand yet. So that can be frustrating, but it also ties back into this whole concept of like, there's so much to understand and so many nuances. So again, it's like those things where if you didn't hear it and you didn't even notice it was there, then that's an indication that we just need to keep listening further and keep studying, because these things will start to come out. And as our ear gets faster to hear these notes and to be able to catch them and understand what's going on, these are all, parts of it. So not to belabor this part too much, because we'll go back to the music. It's just that there's a few things. This was an interesting ornament. So one more time, just to catch this. Last thing with this part here. Wow, these are incredible. So this kind of movement here is called Zamzama or Zamzama. It's this quick kind of tapping of the note. So we'll hear it. pretty hard to do. And on sitar, this is definitely a technique that sounds really nice. On sarod, we can try to emulate it. We can try to use this a lot. So this is a really beautiful technique, and I love these lines because it just shows, it's just like a precursor to the amount of things he's going to be doing. So like imagine Taans that like incorporate this with gamak and sapat. It's like pretty killer stuff to study. So all these techniques, you know, things to think about, and we get to watch his hand. So for the sitarists out there, it's like looking at what he's doing, his body language, his posture. One thing I really admire about Nikhilji and my dad is that when you listen, you watch them, they're so immersed in their instrument. Like, even though they're in front of an audience or wherever they are, it's like you look at Nikhilji's face and there is this kind of like serene calm to his face, even when he's playing the most like complex, crazy stuff. But Nikhilji has such a serene face, and when you look at him, it's like he oftentimes is like staring, you know, somewhere else, or he's like staring at the back of his sitar, or he's staring at like his hands, and he's not like outwardly expressing himself when he plays these really beautiful lines, staring out into the audience and like trying to lock eyes with everybody in more of like a showmanship way. I mean, that, you know, people do it to really great effect, but he really dials it in, and it's like I just love watching him because when you hear him, he does so many things where you're just sucked into the sound, right? And you're just there. And then when you can watch him doing it, though, it's like he's sucked into the sound himself, and it's him doing it. So very much that concept of like disappearing from the body and just being a channel or a medium for the music. Super pure. And I just like, man, every time you see it with him, it's like, oof, beautiful. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's go back to the first time he shows the sum. So I lied. One more. He's not showing the sum, this mora. He's not going ni ni. Where are we? In between those lines, and he played so many things. So he's exploring. He's doing different like chordal arrangements, arpeggiated things, and kind of going down the scale and moving up, all within one scope of a line. So that is a really nice approach. He's just really building and digging in, almost like extended paragraphs or like a very long paragraph before he finally finishes his idea and moves on. So one thing to think about with this is that when we're thinking about showing the mora, when we show some, it's one indication that we finished the idea that we were doing. Like, it's a period point. It is the end of a chapter, moving to the next. Not necessarily a full chapter, but it's the end of something. So I'm really curious to see if he really changes into different movements in different areas of the instrument and the rag, or if he kind of goes and keeps building back and just wanted to give it some breath and kind of restart again. So we'll see where he goes here. Actually, you know what? Let's go back here. This part's awesome. So this is a really good example of when you get to this, in this raga in particular, because the ni, the Shuddh ni, leads to sa, and if you're doing things, so then it's like, what if you're here? What do we do? How do we get back down? So like if you get up to the Shuddh ni, how do we not go to the Antara? Because it's like, do you go from here? It's like if you go up to high sa and start sitting there, well, now we're going to start entering into Antara. But here, he did this line. Or. So let's go back in a second and see. I want to go back just a little bit to see what he did here, because I wanted to stop on the Komal ni, but then also here, because when we get to a note like this and we don't want to necessarily go to the Antara, then we can use little bits of kind of movements to still follow the raga, but not spend too much time on that high sa, or indicate that we've gone into Antara. Because if we do go into Antara, then we're moving the concert and we're moving the performance along, unless we're changing the formatting quite a bit. So here, you could do something like, right? So sa ni re sa ni da pa. So we're not really showing too much of the high sa or going up to the high re or anywhere else. We're not doing like. Once you start doing these kinds of things, you're getting pretty high up there. Bani sa re ma ga re. They're pretty ornaments, but if we start showing these too much and we haven't gone to the Antara yet, then it's starting to kind of change a little bit. I mean, it depends again on the kind of context of what you're playing. If you're sort of showing phrases, doing more of an ouchar, then yeah, you're like in the Antara already, kind of getting past it quicker and then moving on to the gut or something. But if you're doing this longer rendition that he's doing, to then show these types of ornaments would be a little questionable. Like you're kind of breaking the normal sort of flow of the asthai into Antara. So he doesn't do that at all. What he does is what I want to go back to, and it's this part. Wow. To the Shuddh ni. Wow. So he does a small little hint of re, not sa. So he actually went to the re. So it's still, I mean, this is the raga, right? So what he does is he just touches the re here. Ni, re, ni. Wow, wow, wow. So one more time. Right? So, okay, if we take that phrase, when we're thinking about this for our own playing, he's not doing this, right? And sitting on that re. He's not showing the re for like a long time. It's just that sweet. Beautiful. So really nice way of just touching the re. So we're still not in Antara yet, but it's a way of getting out of that Shuddh ni, if you get there. Because that happens in a rag like this. It's like you get to the ni, now what do you do if you're not that versed in it? You might panic and be like, I don't know where to go. So I'm already here, what do I do? Well, I think what he did before also was, if you're at this ni, you could also go, so ma pa ni, you could go ma pa ni and get to the Komal ni to get out also. So, or I did also ma pa sani sani. The ways of kind of, you know, moving around the scale and the raga while not getting stuck, and how we can use the facets of the descending phrases to help us maneuver a bit more. So really beautiful. And this raga is so wonderful that way. And I don't think it's like associated necessarily with like the almost like tendrils. Not tendrils. What's the word? Like if you think of like a storm or something, the kind of like different air currents, but it almost kind of feels that way to me. It's like these little facets of the water going down where it's not always just pouring in one space. It might be swirling in one. So the raga gets this kind of liquidy feeling to it. Really, really beautiful. I mean, that's more kind of taking it directly to the rain analogy, but it's beautiful rag. And that's really, anyway, I just really liked what he just did here. One more time, we'll come back to this re, and then we'll move on. Mama. See, he just does it there. Back to the knee. Pasani zani. One more time. Back here. This part. Shuddh. Komal. Oh. Such pretty. These little movements that he's doing, these little ondulant. Wow. This stuff is so nice. Wait. These little hints, like he's on the knee. This nizani dani, this nizani like danida. So if we're thinking about these kinds of movements here, these little microtones that we're touching to get these extra sweet movements here. This first one, nizani, but then he does this knee kind of movement to the ta from the komal knee. Super small, but if you take that note specifically, right, if we play it, it's like somewhere in between komal knee and shuddh knee. Like, not that idea of chari knee, it's a little different because we're not sitting on it. It's just touching the slightest little hint up from the komal knee to get that ornament. So let's listen to him one more time, because these little movements here are just, gorgeous. And if we can play them and find the right places, the right spaces to put them in and kind of bring out those extra little movements of the emotion, these are the kinds of things that you don't even necessarily notice for a long time in this music. And you're like, wow, why did that sound so pretty? And you hear it and you're like, oh, it's just these notes. Ni sa ni da, and you're like, yeah, but there's all these little micro movements in there that he's adding in, all the ondulant and all these little extra shrutis that we don't even necessarily notice at first. Oh, okay, so he didn't do that. I added it. Well, I take it all back. I made that part up. He did not do that ornament on the komal ni one. Whoops. Okay, after all that explanation, well, I guess I was just tooting my own horn. I made it up. Sorry. That wasn't me. That wasn't him. So, I like what he did better, but... So, the lesson's still there, because we still got to listen for those things. But it's a good reminder that you might hear something and think it was one way, and to double check and go back, because that's not what he played. But I thought it was. So if I had said that and then kept going, I may have been like, oh man, that's a really nice line to do. And then I'm just making stuff up and incorporating it into my own playing. Not that it's wrong, but that, that's not what he did. now we're gonna see if he goes to the Antara or if he starts going back down and rebuilding everything. So Shuddh Ni already, so probably the Antara. Up to the high sa here. Okay, so we're in a jor. Okay, but listen to this speed of the jor. So here we are. So the ending phrase, now listen to how he gets into the jor. When does the chikari start? Knees up, chick, chick, chick. Chick, chick, chick. So he's at a good clip already. Beautiful shot of his hand though, man. So much he's doing. Well, but they're showing only the right hand. Okay, so that line, straight up, this one particular line, like if you took this, right, and you just practiced it. Wow. So this phrase, right, I mean, these types of movements here, beautiful. And I mean, you could practice those a million times to try to get that sound. And then it's like on the sarod, you have to adapt it from a different place, right? So sitar, vocal, violin, cello, whatever you're playing, it's like, you take these movements here, but with something like this, they're basically the same movement in different parts of the range. So you practice these and you can use them. And these are just really beautiful lines, but they're also really great practice tools because each one of those movements is hard and they're also pretty, but it's also a really good example of what you can do with one particular like ornament shape or one movement and how you can move that movement around and create all these different voicings and things. It's essentially like an alankar movement that you're using, and it's a slide or a pull in this case. Well, he's pulling and he's sliding to do this. Last time. And Krintan. Okay, so here, this part here, pani sari gari. Okay, so he plays pani sari ga re, this pani sari ga. So now with this, it's like he almost pauses slightly after the ga. Like, I don't know if he meant to continue with that. And so we're going to see if he does more of that. But this is one of those questions that I had at the beginning was like, this isn't how we usually move through the raga. We don't do these pani sa re ga ma pa. We don't go through the raga this way. So it's like, does he use it in other places? Is he using it in faster lines? Is it only coming out in this kind of zamzama, this? Like, is it only coming out in these spaces? In case, we heard this one. But he comes right back to the re. Picking up the speed because he's on television. Has to move through. Wish I could have seen his left hand in that whole section. right? These Taans that do so many things in the line, and it's not like they're just random little bits and pieces here. I mean, I guess you could say music is random bits. Well, anyway, that's something else. But if we're looking at what kinds of things he plays, listen to this line again. So we had straight runs, right? And then he's kind of doing these curved sort of palta patterns. Then he comes up into gamak, this part here. Beautiful movements of the ornaments. Krintans into gamak, into big pulls. Right? I mean, there's so much going on in these types of movements here. It's like all within the context of a fast line. These aren't like separate pieces. These are all building up into just one Taan that he's playing. So it's like so many mechanics. Like I'm gonna look at that line later and start to be like, okay, he's playing this phrase here, he's playing this here. Can I even play it to speed? If you slow it way down, so that's, one thing with these programs, why they're amazing, and it's definitely cheating, but hey, who's judging you here? We just want to get better. We can slow the tempo down, and then we take that line and helpful to be like, as a study tool. You can use these tools, you can loop them and just play them again and again and again and try to pick up the pieces and see if you can take any of these sections and then just use them as your exercises. Every one of these pieces is basically a part to practice, and we do that in our compositions anyway, but this is really nice. And this is not the only one. He just did one before this, he does this one, now he'll do more. We're going into Jhala. Cut. So with this, let's go back just a second so we can, he's gonna go in the gut, so let's just go back just 1 second here. So listen how he ends, right? So he does the kind of big sort of runs of about like 3 Taans that he goes into, then he moves into Jhala, and then he goes into this one last line. Pseudo Jhala at the end, and he does a really nice Krintan line. And now he's going into a Jhaptal gut. So this is 10 beats. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so one thing to think about here, right? So he plays Alap into Jor into really small jhala, but then he goes into the gut. They're on camera, right? They're filming this for some broadcast. So they only have X amount of minutes. It's live. They're being recorded, right? So they're trying to move through sections, but also keep things kind of exciting. So it's not a slow Jhaptal. This is a pretty peppy, upbeat Jhaptal that he's jumping into. And then what do? They kind of passing it back and forth. So almost like playing like one cycle and then kind of trading it off. Not like Sawal Jawab where they're passing it off and then waiting. Nikhilji finishes his line. In that space where he's not playing, then Mahapurushji is then going off and he's soloing in like the one cycle space that he has with like 5 beats if they're kind of trading it back and forth. So it's really dynamic, like right out the gate, passing it back and forth, and then gives them a longer solo. So look at their interplay. How long are they playing for, right? Like if he plays full Alap, does then Mahapurushji play a long introductory solo? Does he play a small solo? In this case, it's all fairly quick moving. It's also Jhaptal, so less beats than Tintal. It's not in Vilambit speed, so it's moving faster. All these factors are going into what they're creating. And then they're really just playing off of each other right now. So now we're going to see. It's kind of a fun sort of like just jump into it, and now they're playing. And now let's see, once they kind of explore that for a little bit, do they dial it back a bit? And maybe Nikhilji would go deeper in and kind of start to, build out longer stars, bigger lines, and then start to incorporate more like longer solos from Mahapurushji and see where the sections go. Or maybe they're going to do something totally different, and we're going to find out. But these are just the formatting concepts and questions to have, and to kind of try to keep track of what they're doing and to think about what you could play. If you're playing tabla, like what would you do? They come in and play this really beautiful Alap, then they kind of thrust it back at you, and they keep giving you more and more spaces to solo. It's like they finish their line and it's only a few beats, now back to you, and you're like, oh man, I'm really having to play a lot of things here and keep up the energy because it's not slow, and you don't really have a chance to kind of like build up. You've just been sitting there for 20, 30 minutes, and now you just have to jump in and start shredding basically. I mean, these are all the things to keep in mind. getting to see Mahapurushji's face is fantastic. Look at all that emotion on that face while he's playing. That is so cool. I never really, you know what? I don't actually think I've gotten to watch him play live in video too many times. I gotta look for more. I'm just gonna go back because he's clearly having fun, but really look at his face. It's great. Digging deeper now, right? Ago, a little bit back. This usage of the ni to the Komal ni with the re. So this phrase here, this pa ni, re, ni. And the kind of things, more examples of what we can do around the ni and the re. So it's not going or He did this one earlier when he was before the Antara, right? And I was pointing out how he goes like this. This thing here. So this usage of the re, how we can use the re in different ways to get from ni to ni. And so this one's nice. So with this though, right, when you hear somebody play this phrase, this is not like, it's like you can use it, but also like if you only showed this way of going from ni to ni, then it's not maybe the fuller idea of the raga. So with this, it's like if you hear Nikhilji do it, obviously it sounds beautiful and it's him. So it's like you can kind of, you gotta, you can trust the masters. These are the best, but at the same time, they're able to bring out other aspects of the ragas and the different sounds, and keep the mood there, or be able to move on and bring the mood back if they do change something or play something that somebody else tries it and it's like, ooh, what was that, man? Like, ooh, that didn't sound very good. Not that that sounded bad by any means. I just mean that when you play a line like that. Like if that was your core conception of Desh, it's like, well, you're missing more of the raga. So don't only use these phrases, but think of them as other ways that you can kind of maneuver it, like a side path or something like that, but not the main kind of boulevard. That would be a nicer way to maybe look at it, like a little side street or something. But just nice ways of showing this and the different ways he does it. Then you take that and we look at how many more times we can find it. I'm sure he played it more because I may have just missed it, but he did one version, right? That was like this. But, with this, think of all the different variations we can use to do that. But just wanted to point that out because it was one that stuck out when he played it. So line design wise, right, what you can do, how it's like you can build up these kind of bistaras, building slower ornaments, really pretty movements, and then be jumping into these different rhythmic taans. Like he plays one and then he jumps into hyperdrive, right, playing in like sixes when he does it. And these are all really good examples of what we can do and what we can aspire towards, because obviously these are really challenging. These are really difficult, beautiful lines, but they're not just technically difficult, they're also quite pretty. And so it's just I said it earlier, but it's like his design of lines and his Taan design, if you thought about it that way, is really like just, he's constantly trying new things and just so many aspects of what we practice, how you can incorporate that into your movements and your playing. And he's just a really good example of it. And then also this interplay back and forth. Again, it's like he finishes that line, then they are kind of like, just really looking like they're having fun here. Camera was not focused on his hands. soft sunrise. How about it? So this is on YouTube. They're cooking, man, and there's still like another about 10 minutes or so. Beautiful, beautiful recording. Even though it's like straight up close-ups on like the other person while the other person's soloing. You know, it's back in the 60s. They still hadn't really gotten versed with what was happening yet with Indian music, and everything is pretty exciting, and they're definitely going for some artistic shots like the close-up on the baya. I mean, it looks cool, you know, getting the reflection of Nikhilji in the camera, but you know, sometimes it's like they do a few of these phrases where you're like, oh, if I could just see your hand, like that would have been so nice to see what it was. Like Mahapurushji's his posture while he's playing, and it's like you never get like a far off shot where you can just see his body, really his full body, like front facing while he's soloing, and it's like he's playing such crazy things, and it looks so effortless when you watch his body as he does it, and the posture that he's at. This is pretty priceless, all these examples. And so for sitar players, it's like, man, if you're in the Malhar style and you want to look at Raviji and Nikhilji, it's like, well, man, this recording has got so many golden pieces, right, and so many sections that we can just study and practice. And again, if if it's not even just the sound that you like of Nikhilji, but also his like mannerisms rather, like the way he holds himself while on stage. And I just love it. It's like, he's having a good time. You can see him smiling in occasions, but he's really just deeply in the music when he plays. And my father was the exact same way. And I think that's how he trained a lot of us to also kind of focus that way. and really beautiful. So these are really wonderful examples. So many beautiful lines that are crazy and just really jam-packed with things to practice and study. Also, beautiful raga. Desh is beautiful. I keep saying the word beautiful. It's like the only adjective I can come up with right now. But it's just a wonderful raga. Highly recommend going back. There's a whole beginning part that focuses on Mahapurushji, and there's some talking beforehand. So it'd be worth looking at another time. If you have any questions or you find recordings that you'd want to go over later, or that you have questions about, you can send them to me. I mean, these are all really important things, and the listening side and study side of these recordings that we're gifted with can really help accelerate our study. That's something that I think we're really blessed with, even though we don't get to necessarily be around these masters anymore. Or if you don't live in India, you don't get to go see all these concerts all the time, especially during this time of year where the festivals are starting to kick up again. But it's like with the recordings, we can really, really focus in on our ear training and the idea building and concept of raga, and just trying to just let these things soak in over time, and kind of speeding up the timeline of how long it takes to learn a raga, to really start to become sort of one with it, or allow it to sort of integrate with yourself and digest, internalize all these things that are so essential to our development as musicians, especially if we're trying to play in this style concerts, composing on the spot, really digging in and exploring, and also having fun, because that's where like a lot of the magic lies too. Heaven forbid you actually enjoy yourself and not or only in like the most disciplined study. These are great. If you have questions, send them on, and we're all in this together, and it's all a big supportive family of musicians, and just really happy that y'all are here and are on this path too. So before I get too mushy, call it a night. Talk soon.